Hiya, welcome back. In this episode, we're going to be building a sink cabinet for the bathroom. Now, this is exciting for me for two reasons. Number one, I've never actually built a cabinet. Number two, I get to use sheet material, something that I've put off doing because it was very expensive, and it still is, but it is coming down in price. Now, why am I doing this? Because we've bought a sink. We went to B&Q, saw a sink we really liked, but the trouble is it was sat on top of a cabinet, which was bought separately, thankfully. This cabinet was 250 quid, and the drawers wouldn't pull out without it wobbling. The space at the bottom was all open and exposed. So we decided we didn't like that, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to test my skill, or lack thereof, using sheet material before I build my big floor-to-ceiling media center home office storagey thing. So basically, this is a potential chance to ruin a £40 piece of ply. The other thing is I'm trying to save money. So if I can build this for less than 250 quid, I win. Unless I build it and it falls apart. But I'll be keeping track of the costs as we go. So I've even done a cut list and a plan. Let's crack on. So this project starts off with me on the floor like some kind of peasant and forgetting to plug in the track saw, which kind of helps it work. I used my longest length of track and cut down this sheet of ply that I got from MKM, which are building merchants in the UK. The sheet itself is 18mm ply and it cost just £34, which is cheaper than it was a few months ago, that's for sure. As you can see, I'm struggling along here. With half the house in storage, we are very limited for space. With the plywood cut to the right width, I then had to cut it to the right length. Now I'm doing this on my workbench using the track saw again, it was the easiest option. I'm laying the ply on top of some insulation foam. Now I remember seeing a tip for this at one point saying, oh, use some old insulation foam you have lying around. And I thought, who the hell has insulation foam lying around? Well, me, this guy. And it works an absolute treat. Okay, so I've made a lot of sawdust, but I've also made my panels. I have decided to go against the drawers and the open space at the bottom like the B&Q one. I'm thinking more doors, then you can hide bleach and toilet roll and bathroom things in there and you don't get to see it. Now, because of the sink design, I'm not going to be able to build this cabinet the same way that I've watched all the videos on how to build a cabinet. So I've cut out these, I think the Yanks call them nailing strips, support braces, battens, whatever you want to call it, 100mm wide. I'm going to use those, but in a slightly different way to try and hold the sink in place while still being able to get to all the plumbing. We'll see how it works out. Next thing I've got to do though is to cut a rebate, a groove, in the bottom of the side panels so that they will sit on the bottom panel. Because if I just attach them like that and the weight of the sink, that's not going to be the strongest joint. So I think the idea is you have it lipped over to provide strength. Here's the kicker though. I can figure out 4 ways in which to do that. Number 1 is on the table saw, but I don't want to have to take the riving knife off because last time it caused chaos and I broke something. Number 2 is on the miter saw, but the miter saw doesn't go deep enough to cut it, so I'd have to cut it one side, flip it, turn it round, do the trenching feature. Number 3 is with the track saw and just squidge it along each time. And number 4 is with the router table. I don't know which one's best, but I do know I'm hungry, so I'll figure it out tomorrow. I decided on the router table for a few reasons. Number 1, it would give me the most consistent cut because it's the only fence I've got on any of my tools in the garage which is reliable. Number 2, if I did it on the miter saw, it would take a lot of time, same as the track saw, and I really don't trust my table saw. I took it slow and steady and did a 10mm depth cut and just kind of nudged the fence along each time. The only downside of this is my shop vac is broken as well, like pretty much everything else, and I had to keep stopping and clearing out the dust and basically making sure I didn't start a fire. After sanding off some of the splinters I created, this fit was actually surprisingly good. It wasn't perfect, but this is going to be paint grade, and I should mention that now, so any little voids or gaps can be filled with filler and then painted over. It was fine for me. So it's the next day. I left it where it was last night. There was no point in rushing because I needed to get it all glued and nailed together and all the pocket holes screwed, and I just thought best to leave it where it is. If you're wondering why I'm in a jacket and a fleece, it's because it is blowing a gale outside and it's freezing, despite it being the final day of May. Now, on a side note, you'll have noticed that I'm looking a little professional with a microphone now. That is purely for days like today. Normally when it's windy in the garage, the doors are rattling, the breeze is coming through, and the camera can't pick up my audio at all. So if the audio is any better today, you'll have to let me know that I'm along the right track. In terms of running costs so far, I've used less than a sheet of ply, but I'm going to count the whole sheet towards totals. That sheet cost £33.99. I got it from MKM, which is a builder's merchants here in the UK. I thought that was a great price. It is not the best. As I've cut into it, I'm noticing all pockets, but I'm going to be painting this, so it doesn't matter too much. I've also picked up a half sheet of MDF for the inset on the shaker doors. That was £11. So far, cost isn't too bad. Other than that, I'm using some leftover hinges from fitting the kitchen, and I'm going to, I think, use some scraps of pine that I've got left over for the stiles and rails of the shaker door. Anyway, talking to you is not going to get it finished though. Now, my next job was to cut down the nailing strips or support braces or whatever I'm calling this to fit inside my cabinet. I'm purposely not giving you guys any measurements because this is very specific to my sink. As I'm doing this and editing, I am noticing sparks inside of my miter saw. Is that a bad thing? I would guess it probably is. Is it time for a new tool? I would guess it probably is. With those cut to length, I headed over to the world's worst pocket jig. The great reason why you should not try and skimp on certain things. Instead of buying a Craig jig that would have been useful, I bought this one which was half the price, and I hit my hip on it every time I walk past. Adding a piece of wood and then doing up the little tightening clamp is the most painful, frustrating thing in the world, and I hate every time I use it. But pocket holes are required for this. So the two main parts that I've not been looking forward to. Number one, doing the glue up on my own. I haven't got any angle clamps or any of those fancy Rockler L-shaped. No. Now I did think about making a jig, and then I thought, that takes time. The other thing I've not been looking forward to, getting these stickers off. Whoever thought it'd be a good idea to put extra sticky labels on a porous material is an idiot. Now, I've probably already mentioned in the voiceover that this is not the right way to build cabinets, I don't think, from the videos I've seen. But the trouble is I can't have a back panel because of plumbing. I can't have any more support beams because of plumbing. And I can't have anything on the top because that's where the sink's got to sit in. So this is kind of the only thing I can do. But it seems to be working. It's fairly solid and the glue's not even dry. For the stiles and rails of the door, I'm using this rounded over piece of pine. We originally bought these as door trims, but they sent the wrong ones and they have not asked for them back, so I'm going to put them to good use. After trimming them down to the right width, I then took them over and cut them down to the right length. Well, actually not the right length. I left them a little bit long because now they've got to be passed through the router table. Now, because of tear out and things like that, I thought it was a good idea to leave them a little bit long and cut them down properly at the end. At the router table, I'm just sending these through with a 5mm depth. We're using a 10mm router bit. Now the ply I've got is about 10mm, but I want a bit of extra tolerance. So what I do is I push them all through on the fence that is slightly offset and then turn them over on the other side and then do it again, so that the panel in the middle of the shaker door is going to be floating. Don't know if it's the right thing to do, but it's what I've done. Like a glove. I then used my track saw and the piece of insulation foam that I just had lying around to cut my shaker door inset 10mm in total, bigger than the reveal that you would see. Is it called a reveal? I don't know. Once I was sure everything was going to fit together, I used the trenching feature on the miter saw to basically just nip off part of that stile or rail, I don't even know at this point, and make so like there's a tongue to go in the groove. I think that's how you do it. I did that. I was clearly in the kind of mood where I needed to congratulate and celebrate myself as well, because this fit together beautifully, and I was obviously very humble about this. Look what I did! I know to some this is like their bread and butter, this is what they do all the time, but this is quite precise joinery. It's quite in depth. Everything takes thought and planning and measurements and endless checking. And me with my chaotic brain, I've made one door. I mean, I've got to make another, but the garage. I feel like I'm maybe learning. It's a worrying thought. I hate painting. Said in the last video that I didn't mind decorating the house. But the reality is, I do. I don't enjoy it. Now, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing by painting it beforehand, but I do know this is going to be in the bathroom with humidity. There's a chance that the frame, the shaker frame, will expand and contract, and I don't want any exposed MDF. Don't know how I'm going to then stain the stiles and rails without getting it all on this, but this is the path I've chosen. Also, I'm not sure about this colour. It's a little bold. I also should have probably done a better job of getting rid of the dust. Never mind. In the last video I said, oh yeah, I store all the tools under the stairs because then I don't have to go back and forth to the garage. Well, now I can't be bothered to go back and forth to the house. Hence the giant hammer. I decided the way to get around the potential of stain getting on the interior was to basically dye or stain the stiles or rails beforehand, before the glue up. Now I'm using this Little Fair wood dye, which is what we've used throughout the house. This is not an advertisement, it's not a sponsor. This stuff is incredible. You barely need any of it. And it takes pine and just gives it a slight oak tinge, and the dye itself blocks the yellowing of pine over time. Now there's areas of the house where we've used this and it's been kind of 6-7 months and we've not had any yellowing of the pine, even in direct sunlight. It's exactly what we were looking for. So as with the theme in this project, lots of things I've never done. Edge banding. Now, I'm guessing I just use an iron and iron it on. I mean, I can iron a shirt. You just iron it till the creases are gone. How long do you iron edge banding for? Can't wait to go back to work on Monday. Oh, what did you do at the weekend? Oh, I ironed some wood in the garage. You know, the norm. I don't know how good this stuff is either. £5 off Amazon for 5 meters. Oh no, that's the door. My brass knobs are here. Anyway, delivery taken. Nice chat with the postie. Back to the grind. I feel like that's actually gone pretty well. Now, it's not perfect, but this is all going to be painted. Every part of this, apart from the inside, is going to be painted. So any exterior work you won't see because it'll be covered in filler and then paint. I just didn't want to use filler on the exposed bits of plywood, which are not great. Let me show you. So a lot of the plywood looks like that, fairly solid. But throughout are these grooves and divots. Then you can see the warping in the boards there. And then there's another hole there, and it's even worse on some of these parts up here. Now, I can't grumble because I think it was £33 a sheet. So it was cheap, and sometimes you get what you pay for. But I'm looking for paint grade stuff, and I think this will suffice. So, sharp Stanley blade, because I haven't got one of the fancy edge band trimmers, and then wood filler, and then go inside. Despite the delightful weather, I didn't go inside. I decided whilst that was done, I thought, you know what, why not glue up my doors? And I did. Now, the first door was a pain in the neck to glue up. I didn't enjoy it at all and got so angry I stopped recording. And then the second door was an absolute walk in the park, which I didn't record. Would have made for good YouTube, watching me be a professional with the glue up. Instead, I showed you the painful one. While those were drying, it was on to the next part of this project. Cabinet making is tough. There's so many different elements that goes into it. Respect to all cabinet makers out there. I cut some lengths of plywood 10mm wide to length, and I 45'd them on the end, and the idea was that these bits of ply would be the formation of the toe kick box or the support box or the city on toppy underneathy box. Because I didn't want to see any exposed screws or edge banding at the front of the kickboard, I used a combination of painter's tape, wood glue, super glue and accelerant to kind of stick these miters together. The other lengths you can see in the foreground are pocket hold because they're going to be hidden underneath the cabinet and at the back against the wall, so that doesn't matter. This actually worked out really well, and I'm quite pleased with how this kickboard, toe kick, whatever it's called, turned out. So after a bit of wood filler and sanding, it was down to my favourite hobby, more painting. I hate painting. Welcome back. Now I'm saying welcome back purely for my brain, not your benefit. because it's actually been over 2 weeks since I last touched this project. Now, my wife's been in hospital. It was planned. It's all fine, don't worry. But I didn't get back to this project. We've been busy, but we really need a sink. I shouldn't be brushing my teeth in the kitchen sink anymore. So I thought I had the right size Forstner bit to use with these Bloom door hinges, cupboard hinges. These are left over. They're soft close hinges. They're actually quite expensive, but they're left over from our Wix kitchen build. I want to use these because they were free. Now, I don't want to buy another Forstner bit because that means money. So I've done a test run on these. The hole that it creates is too big, but I'm trying to decide whether I care enough. And I don't think I do. So the hole will be slightly big and you will see a part of the hole exposed, but I'm not buying a Forstner bit. These are nice ones and they cost a fortune, and I don't want to buy a cheap one for a temporary fix. So I'm going to just go for it. I'm going to drill the hardware for these, spray it, and then it's pretty much done, I think. And what a treat it was, having an excuse to use my favourite bit of kit, the Bosch drill press. And that coupled with the Bosch Forstner bits, I mean, I should be sponsored by Bosch because I cannot sing their praises enough. Now, don't get me wrong, I have a lot of cheap kit. These 2 pieces of kit, the Forstner bit and the press, quite expensive, but the cleanness of the cut is unbelievable. With the door side of the hinges done, I needed to move on to the cupboard. Now, because I'm using these recycled hinges, I'm not just screwing them in. They actually come with these little plugs attached to them, so that once you drill them into the side of the cupboard, you can then move them up and down so that you can adjust the doors and adjust the swing. So I'm marking them out here, and then I just drill, fix them. And at this point, I thought I was being clever. Okay, confession time. I thought I was being clever by having this hinge bracket pushed right up against this cross brace. But in reality, that was a stupid thing to do. This hinge plate here is about 2.5 mil thick, so it butts up against that. Now, these hinges have a little bit of tolerance. You can bring them back and forwards, left and right. But if I'm honest, it's getting in the way, and now I can't align these doors properly. Yes, they'll close, but then there's a massive gap here that you'll see, and I don't want that. So I think what I'm going to do is drill a new hole further down, have the bracket further down, and then it's not perfect, but I've got these things here that should be able to maybe plug or just leave a hole there. This is what happens when you come back to a project after a few weeks off it. You turn into an idiot. I did it! I took the plunge, and rather than trying to bodge it too much, I've actually moved these hinges down so they don't get in the way. The doors close and sit flat. Everything's just working so much nicer. Now, I planned for measurements for tolerance to leave a 4 mil gap down between where the 2 cupboard doors close. I read this, there's a good measurement when you're in conditions where the wood's going to swell like a bathroom, but the gap seems monstrous. So I've hung a towel here, and I realised that actually the LED light that I use in the garage that's shining into the cabinet was coming out of the doors and making it look worse. Still not too happy with it, but I'm going to live with it. I'm going to spray everything now with this Rust-Oleum Crystal Clear. Now, I've used this before in the van and it's held up well. It just protects the paintwork a little bit and stops it getting scratched. Dries pretty much matte finish, so that's kind of what I'm looking for. Not looking forward to using this in a dusty environment though. And it's, once again, raining outside in the middle of June. Anyway. Using this spray can was my biggest regret of this whole project. It's caused me the biggest of headaches. It works absolutely fantastically on the wood because you can't see where there's more spray than not, but on that paint it just creates such inconsistencies, and I massively regret using it. It's basically ruined the entire project for me. A lay person might not notice it, but I can see it. It's taken that beautiful finish of the paint, which is consistent, and then just made it patchy. As you can see, I'm holding it 30 centimeters away like it suggests, going back and forth, overlapping like it suggests. It even suggests adding multiple layers, but it just created this horrible difference in the finish, and it's made me a bit sad. So the final steps were to install the hardware, or reinstall the hardware in some cases. So I had to attach the hinges back onto the doors and the brackets into the cupboard, and then I drilled some holes and inserted my knobs. Lols. I did record on pieces of masking tape where the hinges belong to. So I recorded them as top left, bottom left, and so on. I'd spent ages adjusting them so that the doors shut properly and everything was flush, and then you take them off to finish it and you could lose them. So that's a handy tip I picked up from somewhere that I wanted to pass on. So here it is. It's finished. Hinges, doors, everything working perfectly. The sink is not, but plumbing is not an after work kind of job. Overall, I'm really pleased. I've learned an absolute ton, and the cabinet building itself has gone very smoothly. Few things I would change in the future. First thing I'd change is the width of the doors. I don't mind the gap down the middle, but I just wish it was a bit narrower, so I'd go for a much tighter tolerance on the size of the doors. The other thing that I would change is I wouldn't have used that spray can finish. In the van it seemed to work perfectly, but I just couldn't get a nice consistent finish on this matte colour. Also, it's got some flecks embedded in it from dust in the garage because I just couldn't find a way to spray it without getting dust contaminating everything. But for the price, I've learned a lot, and we've got a bathroom cabinet. So I've got the prices here. Full sheet apply costs 34 quid, but I didn't use all of it, but I'm still going to count the full sheet. So £34. The MDF was from B&Q. It was expensive. Half sheet, £11. The edge banding to finish the inside and give a nice clean look was £5 off Amazon. And then the brass knobs were £1.50 each. So that brings it to a grand total of £43, which seems like a bargain. But then again, time is money, and this took a lot of time. However, I'd do it all again, and I cannot wait to do my floor-to-ceiling media centre office thingy in the room next door. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye. We're going to be building something at the sink. Stupid. I was doing